Jae-Hyun Kim did not do nervous. He had closed billion-dollar deals without blinking. He had walked into rooms full of people who wanted to destroy him and walked out having taken everything they owned. He had never once, in 34 years of living, felt his hands go cold before a meeting. But today was different. Today he was going to propose. He straightened his jacket as he stepped into the café, a small, warm place 2 blocks from the restaurant where Arya was already waiting. He had chosen this stop deliberately. 5 minutes alone, 1 coffee, a chance to collect himself before the most significant question he would ever ask a woman. The ring box sat in his left breast pocket. He could feel the slight weight of it every time he breathed. He stepped up to the counter, scanned the menu board without really reading it, and turned to find a seat. That was when he saw her. A woman at a corner table, her back already turning, fast, deliberate, like someone who had just seen something they were not prepared for. She gathered the 2 small children seated across from her with both hands, her movements sharp and controlled. Jae-Hyun's eyes moved to the children. The boy looked up first. He was maybe 4 years old, small face, serious expression, eyes that did not blink. He looked at Jae-Hyun the way adults rarely did, without performance, without agenda, just direct, steady. Jae-Hyun stopped breathing. He knew those eyes, not because he had seen them before on this child, because he had seen them every morning in his own mirror for 34 years. The girl was half hidden behind her mother's arm. She peeked out, cautious, quiet, and for a moment, just one moment, she looked straight at him. Same face shape, same stillness, same careful way of watching the world before deciding whether it was safe. His mind went completely blank. The woman moved fast. She grabbed both children by the hand, stood up, and headed for the door without looking back. Purposeful, practiced, like someone who had rehearsed leaving quickly and had done it more than once in her life. He did not plan to move. His legs moved anyway. He stepped forward without thinking, and suddenly he was between her and the exit, not blocking her on purpose, just there in the space she needed to pass through, and she stopped. She had no choice but to look at him. Selena Harper, 4 years, she looked the same. Older in the eyes, stronger in the jaw. She wore no expression at all, which was worse than anger. Anger would have meant she still felt something for what happened. Nothing meant she had already processed him, filed him away, and closed the drawer. She said nothing. He said nothing. The boy tugged his sleeve. Jae-Hyun looked down. The child stared up at him with complete calm, head tilted slightly to the side, studying him the way the boy's mother used to study him, like a problem that needed solving. The ring box pressed against his chest. He thought about Arya waiting at the restaurant. He thought about the speech he had practiced. He thought about the life he had planned, the timeline he had built, everything exactly where he had placed it. Then he looked at those eyes again. His eyes, in a face that was not his, on a child he had never met. Why do those children look exactly like me? Hey besties, welcome back. If you're new here, please like and subscribe and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We want to welcome you personally. Now, let's get into the story. Episode 2. 4 years earlier, Jae-Hyun Kim was bored in the way that only very rich, very powerful men allow themselves to be bored. Openly and without apology. He sat at the head of a private table at Club Onyx, Seoul's most exclusive members-only lounge, surrounded by the same 5 men he had known since university. Businessmen now, all of them wealthy. All of them the kind of people who had stopped being told no so long ago that they had forgotten what the word felt like. Drinks on the table, music low. The conversation had drifted, the way it always did after midnight, from business to something uglier. "I give you 3 months," said Dante Reeves, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of a man making a very safe bet. 3 months to make her fall. Jae-Hyun swirled his glass. "Who?" "Selena Harper." Dante slid a photo across the table. New heiress. Old money. Modest amount. She just moved here for grad school. Smart girl. Careful. The type that thinks she can read people. Jae-Hyun looked at the photo for exactly 3 seconds. A young woman outside a university building. Natural hair pulled back. Eyes that looked at the camera like she was already skeptical of whoever was holding it. 3 months is too long, Jae-Hyun said. The table laughed. He took the bet. It started as a strategy. He researched her first, her schedule, her preferences, the coffee shop she visited every Tuesday, the bookstore she browsed on weekends. He showed up in those places not by accident but by design. And he made each encounter feel like coincidence. The first time they spoke properly, she challenged him on a business opinion he had stated too confidently, and he let her win the argument because he found it more interesting than winning it himself. She looked at him afterward with suspicion, like she could not decide whether he was intelligent or performing intelligence. He went back. He always went back. Within 3 weeks, she stopped being suspicious and started being curious. Within 6 weeks, she was curious enough to say yes to dinner. And Jae-Hyun, who had planned every step of this, found himself genuinely looking forward to that dinner in a way that had nothing to do with the bet. She was not what he expected. She was direct without being aggressive. She laughed at things that were actually funny and stayed quiet when things were not. She had opinions about things he had never considered, and she stated them plainly without performing them for his approval. She did not try to impress him. She did not try to match him. She just existed, solidly, in whatever room she occupied. He took her to Paris for a weekend in the 2nd month. He told himself it was part of the game. He took her to a small restaurant he actually loved, one no one photographed, one with no status attached to it. And she ordered in broken French and laughed at her own pronunciation. And he watched her across that table and felt something he did not have a name for. He did not examine it. By month 3, Selena Harper was in love with him. He could see it in the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching carefully, like she was trying to protect something fragile she hadn't asked to be given. He had won the bet. He just hadn't told anyone yet. The night everything ended was a Friday. Jae-Hyun was at Club Onyx again. The same table, the same men. Selena had texted earlier that she might stop by the area and asked if he was free. He had said yes, send me your location when you arrive. He forgot the way men forget things they do not consider important. Dante was telling the story. Jae-Hyun heard his own name, heard Selena's name, and leaned back in his chair with his drink because he knew what was coming, and he did not stop it. Dante described the courtship like a highlight reel. The men laughed at each step. Someone called her trusting. Someone else called her the easiest win in Jae-Hyun's history. Jae-Hyun did not defend her. Not because he agreed, because correcting them would have required explaining something he had not yet explained to himself. He did not see the door. He did not see her standing in the entrance of the private lounge, still in her coat, her bag over one shoulder, her face arranged into an expression of absolute stillness. She had heard enough. She did not make a scene. She did not walk over. She turned around and walked out, and the door closed quietly behind her, and no one at that table noticed. Jae-Hyun's phone buzzed an hour later. He assumed it was her. He finished his drink before checking it. It was not from her. He called. No answer. He called again. Voicemail. He told himself she was probably tired, probably asleep, and he would talk to her tomorrow. Tomorrow, she was gone. What he did not know, what he would not know for 4 more years, was that Selena Harper had walked out of that lounge, already carrying his child. Episode 3. Jae-Hyun gave her 3 days. That was how long he told himself to wait before doing anything. She was upset. She needed space. Women needed space sometimes, and he had learned not to crowd them when they went quiet. 3 days, and she would call. 3 days, and this would pass the way everything passed. 3 days came and went. He called on the 4th morning. Voicemail. He left a message, casual, not apologetic, because he still did not fully understand what he was supposed to be apologizing for. He said he had not heard from her and wanted to check in. He said, "Call me back when you get this." She did not call back. He called again that evening. Voicemail again. This time he did not leave a message. By the end of the first week, the casualness was gone. He sat in his apartment on a Thursday night with his phone on the table and realized he had checked it 40 times since morning. He was not a man who checked his phone. He was a man people waited to hear from. The reversal irritated him in a way he could not explain. Something felt wrong. Not the way it felt wrong when a business deal fell through. That feeling was clean, identifiable, solvable. This was different. This was the feeling of reaching for something that should have been there and finding empty air instead. He drove to her apartment on the 8th day. The building manager let him into the hallway. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. A neighbor opened her door instead. An older woman who looked at him with the flat expression of someone who had already decided she did not like him. She moved out, the woman said. 4 days ago. She didn't say. He stood in that hallway for a long time after the neighbor closed her door. The apartment behind Selena's door was someone else's now. The space she had occupied for 2 years had already been cleared and handed to a stranger. And there was no note, no forwarding address, no message left anywhere with his name on it. She had not just left, she had erased herself. He called her parents next. Her mother answered and listened to him speak for 30 seconds before saying, very quietly, "Don't call this number again," and hanging up. He called back. No answer. He tried her father's number. Same result. He hired someone. A private investigator, the best one he knew, a man named Cho, who had found missing persons for 3 of Jae-Hyun's associates over the years. He gave Cho everything. Her full name, her family contacts, her university records, her last known address. He said find her and told himself this was just about getting an explanation. Closure. That was the word he used in his own head. He just needed closure. Cho found 2 traces in the first month. A bus ticket purchased under her name, heading south. A short-term lease, signed by someone with her mother's maiden name, in a city 3 hours away. Jae-Hyun drove there himself. The apartment was already vacant. The landlord said the woman had paid 2 months up front and left after 6 weeks. No emergency contact, no reference, nothing. He was always 1 step behind. The second time Cho got close, it was a hospital record. A clinic visit, routine, nothing serious. But by the time Jae-Hyun reached the city, she was gone again. He stood outside the clinic on a Tuesday afternoon and understood for the first time that she was not hiding. She was running, deliberately, consistently, from him. He stopped after that, not because he stopped caring, because continuing felt like something he no longer had the right to do. She had made her choice clearly. She had chosen to disappear rather than stay, and chasing her was not going to change what he had done or what she had heard. He went back to work, he buried himself in it. Acquisitions, expansions, 18-hour days that left no room for anything else. He told Dante the bet was settled and changed the subject. He did not talk about Selena to anyone. When her name came up once, briefly, at a dinner, he looked at the person who said it with an expression so flat that they immediately changed the subject. He met Arya 6 months later at a charity event in Tokyo. She was beautiful and sharp, and she never waited for anyone's approval before speaking. He was drawn to that. He told himself he was moving forward. He told himself what happened with Selena was a lesson about the difference between a game and real life, and he had learned it and was done. He was not done. On certain nights, when the work was finished and the apartment was quiet, he would look at his phone and remember the last voicemail she never returned. He would think about her face, not the way she looked when they were happy, but the way she looked in the building hallway the first time he made her laugh, genuinely laugh, at something he had not even intended to be funny. He never searched for her again, but he never fully stopped wondering where she was. Episode 4. Selena's alarm went off at 5:15 every morning. She did not hit snooze. She had not hit snooze in 4 years, because 4 years ago she learned that the moment she stopped moving was the moment everything she was holding together started to fall. So she got up, made coffee, stood at the kitchen window for exactly 10 minutes while the city was still dark and quiet, and then she started her day. By 6, she had breakfast ready. By 6:30, Aiden was awake on his own, loud before his feet even hit the floor. Already talking about something he had dreamed, already with opinions about what he wanted to eat, already negotiating with the air itself about whether he had to wear a jacket. Eliana woke up at 6:45. She came into the kitchen quietly, climbed into her chair, arranged her cup and her spoon in front of her with precision, and then looked at her mother with calm, steady eyes and said good morning, like a person who had already been thinking for an hour. They were 4 years old. They were nothing alike. They were the best thing Selena had ever done. Malcolm was at the door by 7:15, which was his version of giving her space. He did not have a key, had never asked for one, but he showed up every morning because he knew her schedule better than she had ever told him. He brought muffins twice a week, he fixed things in the apartment without being asked, and never mentioned that he had fixed them. He sat with the twins while she finished getting ready, and he was patient with Aiden's noise and gentle with Eliana's silence. And he never once made Selena feel like she owed him anything for any of it. She owed him everything. That was the part she could not say out loud. Malcolm Pierce had not been part of her plan. He was a man she met at a community center 3 months into her pregnancy when she had been attending a financial planning workshop because she needed something to do with her Tuesday evenings that was not sitting alone in her apartment, thinking about what her life had become. He sat next to her. They disagreed about something the speaker said. They argued quietly and respectfully for 20 minutes and walked out of the building, still talking. He found out about the pregnancy 2 weeks later when she got sick during a follow-up session, and he drove her to a clinic and waited in the waiting room without being asked to. She had expected him to leave after that. Most people would have. He did not. He showed up the next Tuesday with crackers and ginger tea and acted like that was a completely normal thing to do for a woman he barely knew. He was at the hospital when the twins were born, not in the room. She had not asked him in, and he had not offered, but he was in the waiting area. And when the nurse came out to tell him the babies were healthy, Selena was told later that he sat down and covered his face with both hands for a long moment before he pulled himself together. She had cried when she heard that. She had not told him she cried. 4 years later, he was still there. He helped with school pickups when her work ran late. He attended every parent event at the twins' preschool and sat next to her and did not touch her hand but sat close enough that she felt less alone. He taught Aiden how to kick a proper ball and taught Eliana how to grow a small plant in a pot on the windowsill. He never tried to be their father. He was simply always present, and presence, Selena had learned, was the rarest thing in the world. He loved her. She knew. She had known for at least 2 years. He had never said it directly, but she could see it in the way he watched her when he thought she was not paying attention. Careful, patient, like a man who had already accepted that the answer might be no, but had decided to stay anyway. She had never said yes. She had never said no. She had kept that door exactly as she found it, not closed, not open, just still. Because closing it would have been cruel, and opening it would have been a lie. Part of her heart was still in a place she refused to name. She hated that. She had rebuilt every other part of herself from scratch, her finances, her confidence, her sense of who she was without anyone's validation. But that one piece had stayed exactly where she left it 4 years ago, locked in the memory of a man who had looked her in the face and let his friends call her easy. She had built a small event coordination business, modest but steady, enough to cover rent and preschool fees, and the occasional weekend trip with the twins. She had a small circle of friends, 2 women she trusted completely, which was 2 more than she'd had in the months right after she left. She had a routine, a life, a reason to get up every morning. It was enough. She told herself that every day, and most days she believed it. Then the café happened, and everything she had spent 4 years building suddenly felt like it was standing on ground that was not as solid as she thought. Episode 5. The Frozen Moment Stretched. Jae-Hyun stood in the middle of the café and could not move. Not because his legs failed him, because his mind was running calculations it had no framework for, and until it finished, the rest of him had simply stopped. Selena was looking at a point past his shoulder, not at him. Past him, like if she refused to make full eye contact, this moment would resolve itself and she could walk out of here and put everything back where it belonged. Then, Aiden moved. He pulled his hand free from his mother's grip and walked 3 steps toward Jae-Hyun. He stopped at a reasonable distance and looked up with his head tilted slightly, studying the tall stranger with complete calm. "Why do you look like us?" Aiden asked. The cafe went quiet around that sentence. Or maybe it was only quiet inside Jae-Hyun's head. Selena's stomach dropped so fast she had to press her hand flat against her side to steady herself. She felt the blood leave her face. She felt her throat close. She heard her own heartbeat in her ears, loud and too fast, and she thought, with the controlled, practical part of her brain that never fully shut off, do not panic in front of them. Do not let them see this. Aiden. Her voice came out steady. She was proud of that. Come here. Aiden did not come. He was still looking at Jae-Hyun with that direct, unblinking stare, waiting for an answer the way children wait, without embarrassment, without patience, just waiting. Jae-Hyun looked down at the boy and said nothing. He physically could not find a single word. Behind Selena's leg, Eliana had not moved. She was watching Jae-Hyun with her arms at her sides and her eyes moving slowly across his face, his hands, his jacket, back to his face. She was not frightened. She was assessing. She did that with every new person, took them apart quietly before deciding what they were. She had never looked at a stranger this long before deciding to stay quiet. Selena reached back and placed her hand on Eliana's shoulder, then looked at Aiden. Aiden. Now, he came this time. Slowly, still looking at Jae-Hyun over his shoulder, but he came. Selena pulled both children in front of her, and finally, because she had no choice left, looked directly at Jae-Hyun. 2 seconds. That was all she allowed herself. 2 seconds of full eye contact, and in those 2 seconds, she communicated everything she did not have the time or the safety to say out loud. She was not surprised to see him. She was not happy. She was not broken by it either. She had built herself into someone who could survive this moment, and she was surviving it, but it was taking everything she had. Then she looked away. "Excuse us," she said, flat, polite, final. She moved to step around him. He shifted, not to block her, just an involuntary half-step in her direction, and she stopped and looked at him again with an expression that said clearly, "Do not." She was 2 feet from the door when it opened. Arya Valenti walked in with the ease of a woman who moved through every room like she had already reserved it. She was dressed precisely. Nothing excessive, nothing casual, everything chosen. She scanned the café the way she always did, taking inventory before committing to the space. Her eyes found Jae-Hyun first. Then they moved to Selena, then down to the twins. She stopped scanning. A smile crossed her face. Slow, controlled. The smile did not reach surprise. There was no flash of it, no widening of the eyes that comes when a person sees something they did not expect. It was the smile of a person who had just watched something unfold exactly the way they anticipated. She knew. Selena felt it immediately. She did not know how or why, but she felt with complete certainty that this woman standing in the doorway was not caught off guard by any part of what she was looking at. Not by Selena's presence, not by the twins, not by the fact that Jae-Hyun was standing in a cafe looking like his entire world had just rearranged itself. Arya's eyes came back to Selena's, and held there. The smile stayed. "Jae-Hyun," Arya said warmly, moving into the cafe like nothing in the room was unusual. "I got your text. I came early." She reached him, touched his arm briefly, and then looked at Selena with polished, pleasant eyes. "I don't think we've met." Selena said nothing. Arya did not seem to need a response. She simply looked at the twins once more, unhurried, thorough, and then back at Jae-Hyun with an expression Selena could not fully read. But she did not need to read it. She already understood that this woman was not a coincidence. She already understood that whatever was about to happen next had been moving toward this point for longer than today. She pulled her children close and walked out. Episode 6. The proposal did not happen. Jae-Hyun sat across from Arya at the restaurant for 2 hours and said the right things at the right intervals, and ate food he did not taste and drank wine he did not want. Arya talked. He listened to the surface of her words, while the rest of his mind was still standing in a cafe doorway, looking at a boy with his own eyes. When they left the restaurant, Arya took his hand on the pavement and said, "You were somewhere else tonight." "Work," he said. She looked at him for a moment. "Of course," she said, and did not press further. He went home alone. He sat at his desk at midnight and stared at nothing for a long time. Then he opened his laptop. He started with what he had. Selena Harper. Last known location, gone. 4 years ago. He had stopped looking. Now he looked again. And this time he had something he had not had before. He had faces. He had ages. He had a timeline. He pulled the hospital registries for the city where Cho had last tracked her, searched the birth records database through a contact he had used twice before for due diligence work. It took 3 hours and 2 phone calls. He found it at 2 in the morning. Harper, Selena M., birth record, twins, 4 years and 3 months ago. Eden James Harper, Eliana Rose Harper. He stared at the date of birth. He counted back 9 months. He counted back again because the first count could not be right. It was right. He pushed back from the desk and stood up and walked to the window and looked at the city below him and breathed in, out. He was not a man who panicked. He was not a man who fell apart in private any more than he did in public. He had spent his entire adult life deciding how he felt about things before he allowed himself to feel them. This was not something he could decide his way through. He sat back down, pulled the records again, looked at the date of birth a third time. The math did not change. She had been pregnant when she left. She had known, and she had taken that information and those children and built an entire life somewhere he could not reach. And she had done it alone. And the twins were 4 years old, and he had not known they existed until a boy with his face looked up at him in a café and asked him a question he still could not answer. He did not sleep. He found them 3 days later. Not their address. He did not let himself go that far. But he found the preschool from a public enrollment listing, connected to a community newsletter. He drove past it on a Wednesday morning and parked across the street and waited. He told himself he just needed to see them again, to confirm what he already knew in his body, to look at them in daylight with clear eyes and be certain before he did anything. Selena dropped them off at 8:15. She walked them to the gate, crouched down to Eliana's level, and said something that made Eliana nod seriously, then stood and touched Aiden's face once before he ran inside. She watched until they were through the door. Then she straightened, adjusted her bag on her shoulder, and walked back to her car. She did not look across the street. He watched Aiden run across the preschool yard through the fence and stopped breathing again. The boy ran the way Jae-Hyun had seen in old photographs of himself at that age, leaning forward, all momentum, no caution. His grandmother had a photo of Jae-Hyun at 5 years old, in exactly that posture, running toward something off camera, completely committed to wherever he was going. That was his son. That was his son. That evening, Aiden apparently told Selena over dinner that he had been thinking about the man from the café. Selena would find this out from Eliana, who reported it plainly the way she reported everything. Aiden said the man had his face. I think so too. Selena said nothing and changed the subject. The next morning, she found a drawing taped to the refrigerator. Eliana's work. Careful, deliberate lines. A tall figure with dark hair. 2 small figures beside him. No label. No explanation. Just the drawing, placed at Eliana's eye level, held up with a single piece of tape. Selena stood in front of it for a long time. She took it down, folded it once, then stood at the kitchen counter holding it, not moving for longer than she meant to. Then she put it in the trash, covered it with a paper towel so neither twin would see it later, and finished making breakfast. Across the city, Jae-Hyun sat at his desk, with the birth records in front of him, and 2 words he had been fighting for 3 days finally settled into his chest, with the full, permanent weight of truth. They're mine. Episode 7. The message came through a number Selena did not recognize. I think we should talk. Just the 2 of us. Tomorrow at 11. I'll send the address. Then she set her phone down and finished washing the breakfast dishes and did not pick it up again for 20 minutes. She knew who it was. She went anyway. Not because she was curious, because she had spent 4 years running from things, and she was tired. And whatever this woman wanted to say, Selena had decided she was going to hear it standing up. The address was a hotel lounge on the quieter side of the city. Private booths, low lighting even at 11 in the morning. The kind of place where people came to have conversations they did not want witnessed. Arya was already seated when Selena arrived. She had chosen a corner booth, her back to the wall facing the entrance. She watched Selena walk toward her with an expression of complete ease, like she was welcoming a friend she had not seen in a while. Selena. She gestured to the seat across from her. Thank you for coming. Sit, please. Selena sat. A server appeared immediately. Arya ordered a coffee and looked at Selena with raised eyebrows. I'm fine, Selena said. Arya smiled and waved the server off. She folded her hands on the table. Her nails were perfect. Everything about her was perfect in a way that required daily maintenance and significant money. I'll be honest with you, Arya began. I respect directness. I imagine you do too. Selena said nothing. She kept her hands in her lap and her face neutral and waited. I was there that night, Arya said. 4 years ago. Club Onyx. The air in the booth changed. Selena felt it move through her chest, not surprise, but confirmation of something she had not known she was waiting to confirm. She did not speak. Arya continued, her voice pleasant and unhurried. I had been watching Jae-Hyun for a long time before you. I knew about the bet. I knew everything. But you were lasting longer than anyone expected. Including him. She paused. I needed it to end. So you made sure I heard, Selena said. I made sure you heard, Arya confirmed, without apology, without hesitation. I arranged the evening. I suggested to Dante that it was time to collect. I made certain you received a message that brought you to that lounge at exactly the right moment. She picked up her coffee cup. You were never supposed to be collateral. You were the point. Selena looked at this woman across the table and felt something move through her that was not anger exactly. It was colder than anger. It was the feeling of understanding completely and finally that the worst night of her life had been engineered by a person she had never met. What do you want? Selena asked. Arya set her cup down. I want you to understand where things stand. Jae-Hyun and I are engaged. That is not changing. Whatever history exists between the two of you, whatever the children's situation is, can be handled privately, financially, without disruption. The children will not go without. I will make sure of that personally. You'll make sure, Selena repeated. Yes, the children. Selena's voice stayed even. You want to write a check for the children and have me step back and let you close this cleanly. Arya met her eyes. I want you to be realistic about what you are walking back into. He has moved on. He has a life. Introducing instability now helps no one, least of all those children. Selena looked at her for a long moment. She took in the certainty in Arya's posture, the calculation behind the pleasant expression, the complete absence of guilt in a woman who had deliberately destroyed someone's life and was now sitting across from that person offering settlements. She picked up her bag from the seat beside her. She stood up. Arya looked up at her, still composed, still waiting. I need you to understand something, Selena said quietly. She was not raising her voice. She did not need to. I did not come here because I want him back. I did not come here to fight you for anything. I came here because I wanted to see you face to face. She pulled her bag onto her shoulder. You thought that night would bury me, she said. You arranged it carefully. You chose the moment and the words and the messenger, and you sat back and waited for me to disappear. She looked directly at Arya. And I did disappear. I gave you exactly what you wanted. I stayed gone for 4 years. She took one step back from the table. You should have let it stay buried. She walked out of the lounge without looking back. Through the hotel lobby, through the front doors, into the open air. She stood on the pavement outside and breathed and felt her hands shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of staying controlled in that booth when every part of her wanted to overturn the table. Her phone rang. Malcolm. She stared at his name on the screen. She did not answer, because she already knew what she had to do next, and Malcolm could not be part of it. Episode 8. Jae-Hyun knocked at 7 in the evening. Selena was standing in her kitchen when she heard it. She had known he would come, not today specifically, but soon. She had known since the café that this conversation was waiting for her somewhere ahead, and she had been deciding for days whether she would open the door when it arrived. She stood still for a moment. Then she walked to the door and opened it. He looked like he had not slept. His jacket was on, but the top button of his shirt was undone, which for Jae-Hyun Kim was the equivalent of another man falling apart completely. He had no prepared expression. He just looked at her, tired and direct. "I need to talk to you," he said. "I know," she said. She stepped back and let him in. He came in and stopped in the middle of her living room. He looked around, at the children's drawings on the wall, at the 2 small pairs of shoes by the door, at the framed photo of Aiden and Eliana on the shelf, laughing, caught mid-run somewhere outdoors. He stood in front of that photo for a moment. Then he turned to face her. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Selena looked at him. Then she laughed. It came out before she could stop it. Not a cruel laugh, not performed, but the real, exhausted laugh of a person who has just heard a question so disconnected from reality that their body responded before their brain could. "Why didn't I tell you?" she repeated. "Selena, you want me to answer that seriously?" "Yes." She sat down on the arm of the couch and looked at him steadily. "Tell me what you remember about that night, the lounge. Walk me through what you remember." He went quiet. "Say it," she said. "Tell me what happened." "My friends were talking," he said carefully. "I should have stopped them." "You laughed," she said. "I was standing in the doorway and you were laughing, and Dante was calling me the easiest win you'd ever had, and you laughed, Jae-Hyun. You did not look uncomfortable. You did not change the subject. You sat there and you laughed." He said nothing. "I drove home alone," she said. "I sat in my car outside my apartment for 40 minutes because I could not make myself go upstairs. I packed 1 bag that night, just 1, because I was not thinking clearly enough for more than 1. Her voice did not shake. She had told this story in her own head so many times that the words came out without breaking. 2 weeks later, I took a test in a gas station bathroom because I could not make myself do it at home, and I sat on the floor of that bathroom, and I looked at the result and I thought, I cannot tell him. Not because I did not want to, but because I had already watched him let his friends treat me like a game, and I could not bring a child into that. Jae-Hyun sat down slowly on the chair across from her. He was not the version of himself she had seen in boardrooms or at events. That version was gone. He sat like a man holding something very heavy. "Malcolm was at the hospital," she continued. "He was in the waiting room. He had known me for 5 months. He held my hand before they took me in, and he was there when it was over, and he has been there every single day since. That is who was present. That is who earned the right to be in their lives." She looked at him. "You were not there. You did not know, but you did not know because of who you were in that room that night." "I know that," he said. His voice was low. "Do you?" she asked. "Because you came here asking me why I didn't tell you, like the telling was the failure, like the problem was my silence. And I need you to understand that my silence was the only rational response to what I saw." He looked at the floor, then back at her. "I looked for you," he said. "I know." I moved faster. He exhaled, long and slow. "I'm not asking to undo it," he said. "I know I can't. I'm asking, what happens now? They are my children, Selena." She stood up. "You don't get to ask me anything," she said. "Not yet. You don't get to sit in my home and talk about what they are to you. You made me a joke in front of people who were keeping score. You don't get to be their father because you confirmed a birth record and showed up at my door." She walked to the door and opened it. "You need to leave." He stood. He walked toward the door. He stopped just before the threshold and looked at her one more time, not with argument, not with negotiation, just with the face of a man who had finally, completely, understood the size of what he had destroyed. He left. She closed the door, leaned her back against it, pressed both hands flat against the wood behind her, and stood there in the quiet of her apartment, and did not move for a long time. Down the hallway, Aiden called out from his room, "Mama, can I have water?" She pushed off the door, straightened, walked down the hallway. "Coming, baby," she said. Her voice was steady. It always was. Episode 9. Selena was in the middle of a client call when her phone lit up with the preschool's number. She put the client on hold without explanation and answered. The teacher's voice was controlled but fast, Aiden had run through the gate after a ball during outdoor time. A passing car had braked in time. He was not hit, not seriously, but he had fallen hard on the pavement. There was a cut above his eyebrow. He was conscious and crying and asking for her. Selena was already standing, already reaching for her bag. "I'm coming," she said, and hung up. She did not remember the drive to the hospital. She remembered parking badly and not caring. She remembered walking through the emergency entrance and giving his name at the desk and the nurse's face. Calm, practiced, reassuring. Telling her he was stable, he was okay, they were cleaning the wound. Malcolm was in the waiting room when she came through the doors. She stopped. "How did you—" "The school has my number too," he said. He stood up. "He's okay. They told me before you got here." "He's okay, Selena." She sat down next to him and put her face in her hands for exactly 10 seconds. That was all she allowed herself. Then she sat up and breathed and waited for the nurse to call her back. Aiden was in a small bay behind a curtain, sitting up on the bed with a square of gauze taped above his left eyebrow and a bruised knee that had already started turning purple. He was not crying anymore. He was examining the bruise with intense curiosity when Selena came in. "Mama," he said, "it went 3 colors already." She sat on the edge of his bed and pulled him into her and held him there without saying anything. He let her hold him for about 4 seconds before he started explaining the full story. The ball, the gate, the pavement, in complete detail, with hand gestures as if she had asked for a report. She let him talk. She was still listening to his heartbeat against her chest to make sure it was real. She did not see Jae-Hyun arrive. He came in 40 minutes after she did, through the main entrance, alone. He had no information beyond a 2-line message from a contact near the school who had seen the ambulance and recognized Selena. He did not know how serious it was. He had driven the entire way not knowing, and that not knowing had done something to him that no business crisis had ever done. He walked to the desk, asked about Aiden Harper. The nurse told him the child was being treated, and asked his relation. He paused. "I'm his father," he said. The words came out before he decided to say them. They were just true, and his mouth said the true thing. The nurse checked the file. His name was not listed. She told him politely that she could not provide information to unlisted contacts and directed him to the waiting area. He sat down. He did not announce himself to Selena. He did not send a message. He simply sat in a plastic chair in the waiting room of a hospital, still in the jacket he had worn to a morning meeting, and waited with the rest of the people whose lives had been interrupted by fear. Malcolm saw him first. He came out to get coffee from the machine in the hall and stopped when he saw Jae-Hyun across the waiting room. The 2 men looked at each other. Malcolm said nothing. He got his coffee and went back inside. He did not tell Selena. An hour later, the doctor discharged Aiden with 5 stitches, a bandaged knee, and instructions for the next 48 hours. Selena carried him out to the car, while Malcolm brought Ileana, who had been picked up from school, and sat through the entire hospital visit with her arms folded and her eyes tracking every person who came near her brother. They left. Jae-Hyun stayed. He did not know why. Aiden was gone, Selena was gone. There was no reason to remain in a hospital waiting room at 9 in the evening. But he stayed because leaving felt wrong, because he had spent 4 years not being present for anything, and he did not know how to leave now that he had finally shown up somewhere that mattered. He stayed through the night in that plastic chair. At some point, he slept, briefly, sitting upright with his head against the wall. At 6 in the morning, Selena came back. She had forgotten Aiden's small jacket, left it on the chair in the bay in the rush of leaving. She came through the entrance alone, quiet, and walked toward the pediatric wing. She passed the waiting room. She saw him. He was awake, sitting forward with his elbows on his knees, still in yesterday's jacket, eyes tired and alert at the same time. He looked at her. She looked at him. She stopped walking. She stood there for a long moment and looked at this man who had stayed through the night in a plastic chair for a child he had no legal right to claim, in a hospital where no one knew his name was on the birth record. She did not speak. She did not ask him to leave. She walked on to get the jacket. Episode 10. Jae-Hyun ended the engagement on a Tuesday. No restaurant, no public setting. He called Arya and asked her to come to his apartment. And when she arrived, he told her directly, standing in his own living room, that he could not marry her. Arya was quiet for a moment, then she said, "I will make this very uncomfortable for you." "I know," he said. "I will tell people about the children, about the bet, about all of it." "You can," he said. "I'm already telling the truth to the people who matter. There's nothing you can expose that I'm not already saying myself." She looked at him with the flat, cold eyes of someone who had just lost a negotiation they were certain they would win. She picked up her bag. She left without another word. He stood in the silence of his apartment after the door closed and felt, for the first time in a long time, that he was standing on ground that was actually his. He called Dante the next morning and told him they were done. No explanation, no argument. Dante pushed back, and Jae-Hyun listened to him push and then said, "We're done," again, and ended the call. He worked through the rest of that social circle over the following week, not with confrontation, just with distance. He stopped accepting invitations, he stopped returning certain calls, he did not announce that he was cutting anyone off, he simply stopped showing up, and eventually the invitations slowed and the circle closed without him in it. Nobody outside noticed, nobody was meant to. What he did instead, with the time and the energy he had been giving to those rooms, was show up at a preschool gate on a Friday afternoon, with Selena's permission. One afternoon she had said, "Let's see how it goes," and wait. Aiden came out first. He stopped when he saw Jae-Hyun. Then he walked over with his bag half hanging off one shoulder and his jacket unzipped and looked up and said, "You came." "I came," Jae-Hyun said. Eliana appeared behind her brother. She looked at Jae-Hyun for a long moment. Then she held out a piece of paper, a drawing she had made that day, she explained, of a tree with 4 people standing under it. She did not say who the people were. She handed it to him and walked toward the car. He stood at that gate holding a child's drawing and could not speak. The Saturdays came next, small ones, a park, a lunch, an afternoon where Aiden talked without stopping for 90 minutes, and Jae-Hyun listened to every word, and Ileana sat beside him on the bench and did not talk at all but chose to sit beside him, which was its own language. He learned that Ileana needed the hall light on when she slept and did not like the dark entering suddenly. He learned that Aiden was genuinely frightened of thunderstorms and pretended he wasn't, and the way to handle it was to sit near him without drawing attention to the fear. Just be present until the storm passed. He learned these things because he paid attention, because he asked Selena quiet questions when the twins were occupied, and she answered them plainly, without warmth, but without hostility, because she was a mother first and the information was for her children. He did not push for more than she gave. He did not ask about them. He did not try to be in the same space as her unless the twins required it. He did not perform his changes for her to validate. He just kept showing up every time she allowed it, consistently, without drama. Weeks passed that way. Then, one afternoon, an ordinary Saturday, no occasion, just a park and open sky. Aiden and Eliana ran ahead of Selena on the path the way they always did, racing each other toward the open grass. Jae-Hyun was standing ahead on the path. They did not slow down. Aiden reached him first and ran straight into him, wrapping both arms around his legs with the full, uncalculated trust of a child who had already made his decision about a person. Eliana reached him 3 seconds later and pressed herself against his side and looked up at him with her steady eyes and said nothing. He crouched down and held them both and said nothing either. Selena stopped walking. She stood on the path and watched the 3 of them, her children pressed against a man who had broken her completely, who had cost her years she could not recover, who was now crouched on a park path, holding her son and daughter with his eyes closed. She stood there for a long time, then she walked toward them, not fast, not pulled by anything outside herself. She chose each step. She was not healed. There were still nights when the memory of that lounge moved through her chest and sat there, heavy and unresolved. She did not fully trust him. She did not know if she ever would. But she was not running. He heard her footsteps and looked up. He did not stand, did not reach for her, did not say anything that would put pressure on the moment. He just looked at her and waited, the same way he had been waiting for weeks, patient in a way she had never seen from him before. She stopped in front of them. Eliana reached up and took her hand. Aiden was already talking about the ducks near the pond, and Selena stood there, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, holding her daughter's hand, looking at a man who had finally learned that some things cannot be taken, or won, or pursued into submission. Some things cannot be rushed. Some things, the real ones, simply wait. If the story moved you, please give it a like and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. And we want to hear from you. Selena spent 4 years building a life without him, and Jae-Hyun spent those same years not fully knowing what he had lost. Do you believe people can truly change? Or does the way someone treats you at their worst tell you everything you need to know about who they really are? Do you think she should have gone back to him or given Malcolm a chance? Drop your answer in the comments. We read every single one. See you in the next video.